Evelyn shattered my heart, and I can't help but feel I should have been wiser and more discerning about the situation. Despite the years that have passed, at my core, I'm still a farm boy. My name is David Jones, an aspiring tax attorney by trade. I realize that sounds mundane, but the reality was even less glamorous. Fresh out of law school, armed with an advanced LLM degree in taxation, the only job I could land was in the bankruptcy department of a mid-sized Manhattan law firm. This was the smallest and least desirable practice area of the firm, hardly a prestigious start. My living situation mirrored my humble employment. With New York City's notoriously high rents, Manhattan was out of reach for a junior associate like me. The so-called outer boroughs weren't much cheaper. After a lengthy search, I secured a room in an apartment with two other struggling individuals at the end of a subway line in Brooklyn. The neighborhood was in decline, and my commute to the office was interminable. Thus, my career in the esteemed city began modestly, with a barely decent job and a modest roof over my head. But fortune seemed to smile upon me almost immediately. The firm's bankruptcy partner was Gary Green, a silver-haired expert in his late 60s. He was one of the leading figures in the New York bankruptcy law community, the go-to person for complex or unusual questions. Though he had little patience for incompetence, he was a generous and skilled teacher. Even now, I remain grateful to Mr. Green. In the local parlance, he did me a solid. He became both my mentor and friend, imparting to me a vital skill that would serve me well in the future. At the time, I had no idea that I had found my true calling and that happiness was just around the corner. But first, my heart had to be broken. The bankruptcy department typically comprised just Mr. Green and me. In those prosperous times, bankruptcy was the least prestigious practice at Portman and Rosencrantz. Two part-time associates were available to help when necessary, albeit reluctantly. I received a top-tier education in a field of law that often felt as though it were penned by Larry Scott, a realm where logic was turned on its head and conventional wisdom seldom applied. It was like navigating a world straight out of Lewis Carroll's imagination. Kevin Adams was another graduate from Northwestern University School of Law who had ventured as far east as I had. We weren't close friends in law school, but our shared Midwestern roots drew us together in this cold eastern city. Kevin worked tirelessly for the Manhattan DA's office and had recently married Olivia, a New York City native. Naturally, I found myself invited to dinner at their Manhattan apartment. I was blindsided on my arrival by the presence of a tall, exceedingly attractive woman. Evelyn White was New York elegant. It is the most descriptive way to describe her. This was a sophisticated New Yorker with a casual manner that says her astonishing appearance is to be expected. You could almost believe that the perfection of her form was a fact of nature, and not the result of long hours of work and contrivance. Why she was my dinner partner at my friend's house, I had no inkling. This raven-haired, green-eyed beauty was no match for me. Indeed, no one could expect her to be interested in an average-looking farm boy working at a junior associate job. But apparently, Olivia Adams, in her matchmaking wisdom, felt otherwise. I was treated to an evening of delicious companionship. Evelyn White was not just a beauty. She had what is described as personality. Extroverted and anything but shy, she was a lively dinner companion. She asked me to see her home to her Brooklyn apartment. I expected to hail a cab, but she insisted that we take the subway. She stayed close to me on the ride from Chelsea in Manhattan to Boerum Hill in Brooklyn. It was a trip that took considerable time at night and involved a bit of a walk. She used the time to get to know me. She peppered me with questions, the answers to which she listened intently. It was a heady, ego-building experience. At the door to her apartment, she insisted on rewarding me with a kiss for my efforts in seeing her home. It was a smoking hot, tongue-down-the-throat kiss. She could have melted iron with that kiss. A fact she acknowledged with a knowing smile while she waited patiently for the dumb farm boy to get the message. "Ah, can I see you again?" I asked. With some effort, we found a mutually agreeable time for our official first date. Then with a second but less steamy kiss, she said goodnight. I floated to my own dingy place at the far end of Flatbush Avenue, not believing I could get so lucky. 5 weeks later, and 4 dates into the relationship, I was in a deep valley of despair. The night before, Evelyn broke the news that she could not see me on the weekend. The reason was her prior commitment to another. With great difficulty, I extracted the name Rodrigo Roos from Evelyn. Looking the man up was easy. When I was a boy, he began, this city was still run by the Irish and the Jews. They were an interesting bunch to watch. Third and even fourth generation Americans who spoke with a brogue or slipped a Yiddish phrase into their speech. These were men and women who graduated from Fordham and Columbia, but had mastered the art of being professionally ethnic. They are gone now. I sometimes miss the fun they seem to bring to the political arts. The politicians now are professionally black or Hispanic. They lack the same panache, or so it seems to me, and I think they take themselves a long yard too seriously. I'm sorry, Mr. Green. I don't understand. My fondest wish is for you never to lose that Midwestern innocence you have, he said, sighing. David, your girl's man, was born Rodney Kaufman. His father was an heir to the Kaufman department store fortune, and his mother was a Puerto Rican Jewess, Louisa Roos. Rodney is married to Harper Wilson, of the wealthier of the Wilson families. For political reasons, he has adopted his mother's last name and a Spanish version of his first. Roddy Boy is a professional Hispanic and a full-time politician. Your lady, by the sound of her, will choose you over him for 3 good reasons. First, the man is 47. Your lady is much younger. Second, he is married to a good Jewish woman with whom he has 3 children. That lady is the not very jealous type who lets her husband play, but would strongly object to being replaced, as would her wealthy and influential family. And third, there is Roddy himself and his family. These are progressive times, but I doubt he is seeking to offend his own rich and politically supportive family by taking up with a Christian girl. But if she is dating him, I noted. Gary gave the impatient frown he reserved for stupid questions. How old is the lady? He asked. 29. A lady with a running biological clock, and you an eligible 26-year-old lawyer. I think you have failed to properly assess your worth in this arrangement. The introduction of Roddy Boy into the equation was just to produce a proper motivation in you to move it along. 4 dates in this age with a 29-year-old single woman means. After talking to my boss, I felt more confident and even a bit emboldened. So, on our next date, I decided to push things further and was rewarded with an enthusiastic response from Evelyn. If we are going to take this relationship further, I need to know you're serious, she said. I could ask the same of you, I replied. Are you speaking generally? She asked. Yes, and also about Roddy. I've been seeing him for several years, she admitted. But he's not serious, and I am. I responded, once again appreciating just how astute my boss, Mr. Green, was. That night, Evelyn led me to her bed. While I wasn't inexperienced, she had a lot more experience and used every bit of it. I barely survived the night. A week later, I moved into her apartment. It was spacious by New York standards, with a hallway that seemed to go on forever. The proposal quickly became inevitable, as she began hinting soon after I moved in. Evelyn was 29 when we met, a junior executive at Sanderson Financial Management. She was on the cusp of becoming a senior executive, and shortly after our engagement, she was promoted to VP. I knew she was smart and detail-oriented, but I was almost overwhelmed by her organizational skills. The wedding preparations took barely 6 weeks. Evelyn was the eldest of 3 children and the only daughter. Her father, though a lawyer, was primarily focused on real estate development in Westchester and Putnam counties, just north of New York City. From what I gathered, he was deeply involved in politics, thus explaining the grand wedding they organized so swiftly. My family had dwindled due to various circumstances, leaving me with just one sister. Chloe lived on the West Coast near Portland with her girlfriend. She stopped speaking to me the day she came out as a lesbian. Maybe my reaction lacked sufficient enthusiasm, but chasm formed that wouldn't close. I invited her to the wedding, but she declined. Professionally, my career had settled into a comfortable rhythm. I handled the smaller cases independently, without needing Gary's assistance. He made it clear he was grooming me to take over. With bankruptcy cases in a lull, Gary openly stated that I needed to be prepared for when the pace picked up again because he was eyeing retirement. You've got what it takes, the right amount of smarts and a likable personality. But you need to learn the ropes, he often said. I've been studying the statutes and cases very hard, I assured him. Yeah, but you need to pick up on some moves that aren't written down anywhere. I learned a new move the Friday before my wedding. Evelyn and her mother chose Labor Day for the celebration, a date whose significance I didn't entirely grasp. However, it meant we had the weekend to prepare and could jet off to a Caribbean honeymoon funded by her parents the following Tuesday. Our bags were already packed and lined against the wall in the long hallway of our apartment, 3 for Evelyn and 1 for me. I was a bit nervous about the wedding, but I had no time to dwell on it that morning. The week before, my bride-to-be had gone to her family home in Westchester. Let's have some space apart before the wedding. It'll make the honeymoon all the better and keep my wedding jitters from scaring my hubby away, she said with a laugh. At 10 o'clock on Friday, the last workday of August, just 3 days before my wedding, I had a hearing in bankruptcy court for a first-day order. These orders are issued early in a reorganization to establish the rules for the debtor's continued operations under court protection. In a small case like mine, they aren't very formal, typically involving just a few attorneys and the judge. It's usually the bank's lawyer and a debtor attorney like me. Judge Marks, known for being a stickler for the rules, had scheduled the hearing. That Friday, I entered my office ready to grab the file and head to court, only to have my secretary inform me that the judge's secretary had called to arrange a telephonic hearing as soon as I arrived. I immediately felt a knot of nerves. The judge's clerk got all the parties on the line. "Okay, Victoria, what's your issue with this order?" Judge Marks asked. Victoria Moskowitz, the bank's attorney, was sharp and knew the law inside out. Her argument was precise, targeting the weakest points of my request. Victoria, despite her legal prowess, was not what you would call conventionally attractive. Nicknamed Sugar for some inexplicable reason, she was under 5 feet tall and plump, especially in her lower half. Still, she had a cute face. When Victoria finished her argument, I tried to speak, but the judge cut me off. "Order granted. My clerk will fax it to the parties," he said, and the line went dead. Victoria laughed. "What just happened?" I asked, bewildered. "Judge Marks got tickets from my firm yesterday for the final days of the Saratoga races. He needs to be up north of Albany by 1 o'clock. He can't waste time on the phone with us. He ruled against me today for appearance's sake, in a matter that doesn't really count, but just wait until next time." "I'll slaughter you," she said, still chuckling. "Not the way I like to win," I grumbled. "Take any win you can get," she retorted, and then paused. "You know my aunts would say you are a very fine young man for a Goyish." Still laughing, she ended the call. Around then, Gary came in and told me to take the rest of the day off to relax before the wedding. As I was leaving, I couldn't help but ask, "Gary, what's a Goyish?" He smiled. "You and me, a non-Jew. Why?" "Someone said I was a fine young man for a Goyish." "Oh, that's a compliment. Somebody likes you." I headed to the apartment, thinking I might as well get an early start to Westchester. I wasn't expected until the following day, with the wedding rehearsal scheduled for Saturday night. Why waste time in the city when I could head up a day early? My case had unexpectedly wrapped up quickly instead of taking up most of the day, possibly even the evening. There would have been endless writing and rewriting to satisfy everyone, but that didn't happen. So, why not get a head start? I attempted to call Evelyn first, but her phone went straight to voicemail. So, I made a fateful decision. I called her parents' house in Westchester to either speak to someone or leave a message. As fate would have it, none of the White family members were home. The regular maid, Rosita, had taken the day off for a dress fitting for the wedding and had her cousin fill in. Her cousin, a woman with limited English whom I had never met, answered the call and did not recognize my name. "I want to leave a message for Miss Evelyn. This is David," I repeated for the 3rd time. "She not here, in city," came her reply. "I know she lives in the city, but she's supposed to be home for the wedding. This is David. and I will be there later today. She in city, stay hotel. Be here tomorrow for wedding, Rosita's cousin insisted. It took a moment for my curiosity to kick in. What hotel? I asked. Plaza, she answered. I'm not usually a suspicious person, but who wouldn't be after such a conversation? It was nearly noon, and I decided to call the Plaza Hotel. Our reception was planned for Westchester County, not at the renowned Plaza Hotel in New York. Something wasn't adding up. The ladies had already had a hen party the previous week. Maybe they decided to have another pre-wedding celebration. I called the hotel and asked for Evelyn White. No one was registered under that name. Then, perhaps driven by an uneasy feeling, I decided to inquire further. How about Rodrigo Ruiz? No, sorry, the young woman said. Try Rodney Kaufman. There was a brief pause before she said, Yes, we have a Mr. and Mrs. Rodney Kaufman in the bridal suite. Please connect me. There was still a chance it could be someone else. Kaufman isn't an uncommon name, I reassured myself as the phone rang. When a man answered, I almost hung up, but I had to know. Evelyn White, please, I said. Evelyn, it's for you, I heard him call out. Hello, she said. I recognized her voice immediately, but found myself unable to speak. Hello, is there someone there? There's no one there, she said to him. There was, he asked for you. Hello. It's David. Don't bother coming to the wedding. I won't be there, I finally managed to say, my voice steady. As I hung up, I heard her shout my name, but the line went dead. The next span of time is a blur. I was in shock, sitting in the apartment as if paralyzed. The strength seemed to have drained from my body. Everything good in my life had evaporated. It had all been a lie, the romance, the cohabitation, the trendy apartment. Although we called it ours, the lease was in her name. My mind was in a state of lockdown. I knew I needed to stand up, grab my bag from the hallway, and leave. I had no idea where to go, but I had to be somewhere else. The apartment door opened, and it was her. I vaguely wondered how she had gotten back so quickly. I glanced at the clock. It was 2 o'clock. The judge would be at the races by now, a fact that had just upended my life. David, we need to talk, she said. Were you there all week? I asked, my voice hollow. She stood in the middle of the living room, avoiding eye contact. It was just us saying goodbye, she claimed. So, it never really ended, I accused. David, stop. You know I love you, she pleaded. How would I know that? I'll never see him again. It's over, she insisted. Why? I was with him for 7 years, almost from the day I moved to the city. No, why end it? Because I'm marrying you on Monday, she said, as if that explained everything. No, you're not. David, please be reasonable. Everything is arranged. Over 300 guests are coming. I didn't respond. There was no point. I got up and walked past her. Where are you going? We need to work this out, she cried. I picked up my bag and walked out. She followed, screaming for me to stop until she eventually gave up. I wandered aimlessly for a while, vaguely heading towards the bridge. As darkness fell, I grew tired of walking. I found myself crossing Court Street near the Borough Hall. I spotted a small bar. It was crowded with people enjoying their Friday night, but I managed to find a dark corner to hide in. Hello, a voice said. I looked up and saw Sugar Moskowitz standing there. She had a drink in each hand and placed one in front of me. I thought you looked like you could use it, she said. Thanks, I stuttered, taking a sip of the very strong drink. It's called a stinger, and as you can see, I'm not exactly a religious girl, she said with a smirk. Religious? I asked, confused. She smiled, a pretty smile, and explained, drinking in a singles bar with a goy on a Friday night, and how would I even explain that suitcase to my mother? Her words jolted me back to reality, and I looked down at the suitcase by my side, remembering why it was there. Well, I had to leave. It's her apartment, after all, I murmured, taking a deep gulp of the drink, which burned all the way down. Sugar, or rather Victoria, didn't bombard me with questions. Instead, she launched into funny anecdotes about herself and the people we both knew from the bankruptcy court. Our field is small, and everyone knows everyone else. She kept my glass perpetually full, trying to coax a laugh out of me. She probably knew about my impending marriage, but she didn't seem shocked to find me in a Brooklyn bar on the Friday before my wedding, suitcase in tow. Maybe she had a few drinks before I arrived and didn't grasp the suitcase's significance or my current predicament. What stands out the most from that night is Victoria helping me into a car and saying, "It's a short ride." Later, I dreamt about Evelyn. She was straddling me, cowgirl style, not her favorite position, but she seemed to be enjoying it more than usual. I woke up with an urgent need to pee. As I got out of bed, I realized I had no clue where I was. The room looked different. For a moment, I was completely disoriented. Then it hit me, all in a sharp and painful flash. I had walked out on Evelyn and her apartment. But where was I now? My head ached and felt stuffed with cotton. The night before was a blur. I remembered entering a small bar on Court Street. Someone familiar showed up. For a moment, I couldn't recall who it was, and then I did. Victoria Sugar Moskowitz. What was she doing there, and why was I here, naked, in an unfamiliar bed? I was in a small room, barely large enough to accommodate the double bed I was lying on. The room was devoid of any other furniture. The bed was pushed up against a window that stretched from the middle of the wall to the ceiling. Evidence of a second person's presence was clear. There was no closet, and my clothes were nowhere to be seen. The room might have been an overly large closet retrofitted with a bed. There was a door, but it couldn't open fully, obstructed by the bed. I peeked out and saw a larger room. A bay window jutted from one side, offering a view of the sidewalk outside. I realized I was in what they call an English basement, a floor wedged below the main building, half above and half below ground level. The windows started just below the sidewalk. The space had been converted into a small apartment, or rather two, as I later learned. I was in the front one. There was another, smaller apartment at the rear. The main room was divided by a counter, splitting it into a dining area and kitchen. The bay window formed a cozy living room nook with two small chairs and a window seat. Seeing no one around, I crept out, searching for a bathroom and my clothes. There was a door on the far side of the room. As I moved toward it, the door opened and out walked Victoria Moskowitz, wearing a bathrobe and rubbing a towel over her wet hair. "Oh, you're up," she exclaimed, spotting me. "About time. It must be almost noon." My hands instinctively flew to cover my genitals, which only elicited a giggle from her. "Bit late for modesty now," she said. "I saw it all last night." Mortified, I dashed past her, assuming correctly that the room she emerged from was the bathroom. Once inside, I closed the door, lifted the toilet seat, and relieved my overburdened bladder. The bathroom was small, featuring only a shower stall and no tub. I decided a quick wash would do me good before confronting Victoria about the whereabouts of my clothes and suitcase. The small shower was a blessing. The hot water was soothing to my very hungover body. Feeling slightly more human, I searched in vain for a towel. With no other option, I stepped out, wet and naked, preparing to face Victoria. To my surprise, we were no longer alone. A young, dark-haired woman was now seated at the table, grinning widely at me. Victoria was in the open-plan kitchen, fussing with cups and a coffee pot. "How do you take your coffee?" Victoria asked, nonchalantly, as if I wasn't standing there stark naked. I quickly retreated behind the bathroom door and called out, "Could I get my clothes, please, or at least a towel?" The two women were laughing, but Victoria managed to pause long enough to say, "The towels are in the closet, along with your bag and the clothes you left behind last night." Craning my neck out from behind the door, I asked, "And where might this closet be?" Still giggling, Victoria pointed with the coffee pot toward a set of lowered doors on the far side of the room, just before what appeared to be the apartment entrance. "I'd fetch them for you, but as you can see, I'm a bit busy," Victoria said. The other woman made no move to help, so I had no choice but to sprint for the closet. I dashed across the room, flung open the lowered doors, and found my clothes neatly arranged. My suit and shirt were hung up, and my underwear was folded atop my suitcase. Quickly, I grabbed my shorts and shirt, putting them on as fast as possible, all the while hearing the women's giggles behind me. David, this is my sister, Sonia Rabinowitz, Victoria introduced. Hello, Mr. Jones, Sonia said with a cheeky smile. Hello, I replied, rummaging through my suitcase to pull out a pair of jeans. No need to get dressed on my account, Sonia said. I'm the younger sister, but I'm married with 3 kids already. Naked male bodies don't shock me. They both erupted into laughter as I hastily pulled on my jeans. Come have some coffee, Victoria invited, and Sonia brought Baileys. I'll be right there, I mumbled, still stinging with embarrassment. You didn't tell me he was so shy, Sonia stage whispered to her sister. Didn't really know, Victoria whispered back, equally loud. We're kind of a new thing. You're a loose woman, Victoria Moskowitz, Sonia chuckled. Finally dressed, I moved to take a seat at the small table, yearning for coffee. I like my coffee black, no sugar, I said, hoping to steer the conversation back to normalcy. Sonia giggled again and whispered to Victoria, I guess he got his sugar last night. They burst into another fit of laughter, making my head throb. Victoria handed me a cup of intensely strong coffee. As I set down the cup, a cell phone rang. It was Sonia's. She fished it out of a large leather purse beside her feet. Oh, hi, Sonia said into the phone. Covering the receiver, she whispered, it's Aunt Mela. Of course, I remembered, Sonia continued into the phone. I'm at Victoria's to remind her, but she has company, and I haven't had a chance to bring it up yet. There was a brief pause, then Sonia smirked and said, no, her company is male. Victoria drew a cutting motion across her throat, but Sonia remained unfazed. Yes, he's kind of cute, but a little shy. No, definitely not Jewish. Yes, I'm absolutely sure. Sonia whispered into the phone, I got a peek when he came out of the shower. She burst into uncontrollable laughter. She wants to speak to you, Sonia said, handing the phone to Victoria. Hi, Auntie, Victoria greeted into the phone. No, I would never forget Dad's birthday. 6 tomorrow evening, dinner at 7. Got it. Oh, he's just a friend. Really? A pause followed as Mila spoke on the other end. That's not going to work. He's a work friend. I'm sure he'd feel uncomfortable at a family party. Victoria handed the phone back to Sonia. Sonia listened silently, then turned to me. She wants to know your name. What should I tell her? David, I answered. David Jones. Sonia plunged ahead, speaking into the phone. It's David, and I'm quite certain they slept together last night. Sonia, Victoria gasped. Now Aunt Claire is on the line, and she wants to meet him. No, absolutely not, Victoria yelled. Then Sonia handed the phone to me. My Aunt Claire wants to speak with you. Reluctantly, I took the phone. Hello, David. I'm Victoria's Aunt Claire. My sister Mila and I are hosting a birthday party for our brother, Justin, Victoria and Sonia's father. We'd love for you to join us with Victoria. It would mean a lot to the family. I don't know. I wouldn't want to intrude. Mr. Moskowitz might not want me there. I attempted to politely decline. I'll leave it up to Victoria. Passing the phone back to Victoria, she spent a grueling 10 minutes arguing with her aunts while a mischievous Sonia smirked. The aunts switched off, each taking their turn to convince Victoria. Eventually, she gave in. Okay, I'll bring him, Victoria conceded, hanging up the phone. Sugar, sugar, sugar. Sonia, you do realize what she's saying, right? I asked. Oh, she substitutes the word sugar for make love, as if we don't know what she's actually implying, Sonia laughed. With a final chuckle, Sonia stood up. Well, my work here is done. Time to go save my husband from our children before they drive him insane. Once alone, Victoria turned to me. Look, you don't have to come. My family can be a bit overbearing at times. I just don't understand why your aunts want me, a stranger, at a family gathering. Victoria let out a brief, almost sad laugh. Sonia is my younger sister by nearly 4 years. I just turned 30. She already has 3 children. My aunts and my family at large think I should be married and expecting by now. It sounds like your biological clock is ticking in their heads, but they don't know me, and I'm apparently the wrong religion. But you are the right gender, she remarked, pausing before continuing. I used to have a roommate here to help with the $3,500 a month rent. As you're probably aware, junior bankruptcy associates don't earn much. I nodded, familiar with our line of work's limited salaries. But then a realization struck me. There was only one bed. Your roommate was a woman. Yes, but don't jump to conclusions, Victoria, known affectionately as Sugar, clarified. I'm not entirely straight, but it takes a bit of alcohol for me to be into girl on girl. My drinking was a deal breaker for Jessie, my former roommate. She wanted a relationship I couldn't give her. So here I am, an almost straight, single Jewish woman. I mulled over her words while chewing on a Bailey. It looked like a bagel, but wasn't quite one. Finally, I had to ask the question gnawing at me. Last night, Victoria burst into laughter. Yes, we did, though I didn't appreciate being called Evelyn. Sorry, I mumbled, feeling my face flush. Kate, don't get all prude on me. We were both a little drunk, she said. Actually, you were very drunk. I took a long sip of my coffee, trying to make sense of this unexpected turn in my life. Just yesterday morning, I was on the phone arguing a case against the woman now sitting across from me in her bathrobe, Victoria Moskowitz, or Sugar. Yesterday, I was eager about my upcoming wedding to Evelyn. Now I had lost Evelyn and was discussing last night's events with Victoria. It's too much, I sighed. What is? This, I said. Evelyn leaving and me ending up here with you. She didn't laugh, though it must have been hard not to. Look, you've had a rough go with Evelyn. Why don't you relax here today? I considered her offer. I don't think I can handle being alone right now. If you don't mind, I'll stay. She smiled warmly. Good. We'll work on redeeming my heterosexuality. And that's exactly what we did. We got back into bed. Being with Victoria was different from being with Evelyn. Victoria preferred to be on top and enjoyed me going down on her more than the other way around. Yet her enthusiasm was astounding and completely captivating. Wow, you really enjoy this, I said, lifting my head from between her legs. It's been quite some time between boyfriends, she muttered. But not girlfriends? I asked, curiosity piqued. She propped herself up on her elbows, looking at me. If you're wondering, yes, I've slept with more women than men. I was lying next to her, but a bit lower on the bed. With a swift movement, she flipped herself on top of me, straddling my waist. Gazing into my eyes, she said, nothing beats a man in my book, but I need more than that. I need someone I can relate to, someone I can respect. How do I fit into that picture? I asked. You make a very respectable bed partner. Clearly, your fiancé put a lot of effort into refining your skills. I wanted to respond, but her words stung with a bit of truth. Evelyn had indeed worked hard to perfect my bedroom expertise. More importantly, Victoria continued, you're in my bed because you're a good person. I've watched you. You never intentionally hurt anyone, you're honest, and you treat women like people, not objects. You're one of the good guys, and they're in short supply these days. I replied, that's all well and good, but is that how an aspiring lawyer should be described? And it sounds like you've been keeping an eye on me. Of course I was. I saw you on Court Street, followed you into a bar. If Ms. Evelyn White loses track of her trophy fiancé, I'm not going to pass up the opportunity. I'm not a trophy, I insisted. Are you going to tell me she was in love with you? No, I guess not, I said, feeling the sadness of the situation wash over me. Sorry, she said gently. I didn't mean to hurt you. Once more, we were caught in the grip of passion. Eventually, we ordered takeout for dinner and, after eating, fell into an exhausted sleep. Morning came with a call from her aunts, reminding Victoria of the evening's party and asking if she could arrive early to help with preparations. Victoria, be sure to bring David with you. Sonia has told us all about him, and we're eager to meet him, Aunt Malice said over the phone. I don't know what Sonia told you, but he's not my boyfriend. Well, bring him anyway. He knows he's invited. If he comes, Victoria replied, then hung up. I take it I'm expected, I said with a chuckle. You don't have to come, she told me. What else do I have to do? I said, smiling. I didn't want to be alone, not just yet. Victoria had helped distract me from the wreckage in my personal life, and I had no desire to sit and dwell on what Evelyn had done. Okay, Victoria agreed, but be prepared for some serious scrutiny. You'll be treated like a potential bridegroom. In a way, I am a bridegroom, but if you don't mind, let's keep my personal issues to ourselves, I said. Works for me. Let's pretend Evelyn doesn't exist, just for today. But you're going to have to deal with her sooner rather than later. I know, I replied with a sigh. Victoria reached across the table and covered my hands with hers. David, you have to make a decision. Go through with the marriage or call it off tomorrow. Either way, it's going to be a significant problem. I can't go through with it. Not now. Don't be hasty. Backing out now will have serious consequences for your career and your life. It will be a huge scandal. Why? I don't plan to announce the reason, and I'm sure she won't either. Oh, my poor innocent, she said, squeezing my hands tightly. Do you really think people are oblivious to Commissioner Rui's relationship with Evelyn White? They've been involved for a while now. I thought they ended things. Victoria didn't laugh, but her crooked smile said it all. I'd been played. Evelyn had been seeing Ruis the entire time we were together. But why? I asked. If she wanted to stay his mistress, why bring me into it? He plans to run for governor next year, she explained. Your engagement to Evelyn seemed to end their affair, and you were a suitable catch. The kind of young, respectable, professional, heterosexual man every ciswoman in New York wants. Ciswoman. A person whose gender identity matches their birth gender. In this case, Evelyn White is a cisgender woman. She needed a partner to squash rumors of her affair with an older married politician. She played me for a fool, as you New Yorkers would say. Don't feel too sorry for yourself. She might have been genuinely saying goodbye, as she claimed. The week before our wedding. Would you rather she did it the week after? I'd rather she didn't do it at all. In fact, I insist on it. Well, you got back at her with me. You can still go to Westchester and marry her. Not going to happen. Hey, calm down before you do something you'll regret. If you don't show up at the church tomorrow, people will wonder why. Let them. Okay, time out. A scandal benefits no one. You're a junior associate in the bankruptcy department. Commissioner Ruis is a very big deal. You make waves, and his boat may rock, but yours will sink. You're saying I'll lose my job. Well, so what? I'm saying you'll lose your career. No one will hire you. I paused, but only for a moment. Victoria, I said, I may just be an unsophisticated guy from Iowa, but when Evelyn accepted my proposal, she made a commitment to me. She didn't keep her commitment, and I won't be forced into keeping mine. Victoria shook her head. Finally, she said, Come on, you stubborn corn husker, get dressed. I'm taking you to meet my family. It's not every day they get to meet a real, live Presbyterian. My family's Lutheran, actually. Same difference, she winked. At 5 that evening, we took a yellow cab to the Moskowitz house on Beverly Road. Taking a car service wasn't an option. Uncle Morty had been a taxi driver until he retired, and it was a matter of respect. Now he lived on his Social Security with his 2 sisters, Mila and Claire, in the house they inherited from their parents. Morty had been married, but his wife ran off 30 years ago with a shoe salesman, a topic apparently never discussed. Aunt Claire's husband was killed in Vietnam. Mila never married. Only Victoria's father, Justin, the youngest sibling, had children. Justin and his wife, Rebecca, had 2 daughters, Victoria and Sonia, and 3 grandchildren, courtesy of Sonia and her husband, Gerald Jerry Rabinowitz. The Moskowitz family house was in an area of Flatbush, Brooklyn, that realtors called Ditmas or Ditmas Park. As we approached the oversized 2-story house on a larger lot than typical for the city, I noticed there was no park in sight. Unlike Victoria's apartment, which was across the street from a small park in a quiet neighborhood, her aunts and uncle lived off a busy avenue. Their house was a Fox Queen Anne style, not quite a mansion, but a larger single-family home than you'd expect in a city like New York. We were greeted at the door by Aunt Mila, a short, stout woman with steel-gray hair. She first hugged Victoria and greeted her warmly. Then she turned to me, gave me a thorough once-over, and finally said, "Not bad at all, a fine-looking young man." "Oh, I think he's rather handsome," said Aunt Claire, who appeared from further inside the house. Claire was a tall, dark-haired woman, contrasting sharply with Mila. They seemed an odd pair. Claire also gave Victoria a hug, and the two aunts led us into the kitchen, where they were preparing the evening meal. A large cake sat on the counter, and the air was filled with the aroma of a roast cooking in the oven and the sweet scent of vanilla. "Can you peel us some potatoes, Victoria?" Claire asked, handing her a peeler and a colander filled with freshly washed potatoes. "I'll take your man to help set the table," said Mila, taking me by the arm and leading me through a swinging door into a wainscoted dining room. The room was a long, wide rectangle. A thick burgundy carpet covered the hardwood floor. Dark oak paneling ascended from the floor to halfway up the walls, where elaborate rose-embossed wallpaper drew your eye upward. The ceiling featured an intricate latticework of mahogany and oak. A modest chandelier hung down from a medallion adorned with ornate carved mahogany flowers. Mila guided me to a set of china cabinets along the near wall. The cabinets occupied most of the room's short side. Multiple sets of porcelain plates filled the shelves. She led me to the far cabinet and said, "We'll use these plates today." Smiling at me, she added, "It's not easy being Jewish. You need all these dishes." At that point, I had only a vague idea that one set was for meat and another for dairy. Mila handed me a stack of plates, and we began setting the massive claw-footed table, covered in a pristine white linen tablecloth. I couldn't resist examining the plate backs and the tags on the linen. The china came from England, and the linen from Ireland. The real thing, I thought, just like the people here, genuine. As we set the table, Mila carried on a seemingly aimless little inquisition. I assumed this was intended to separate me from her niece. In short order, she had my personal history, except for my aborted marriage. After placing the last silver fork by the last plate, she said ever so casually, "It doesn't hurt, you know. It's just a little snip. Most babies don't even cry." I didn't understand what she meant. However, before I could ask for an explanation, we heard a clamor in the hallway. A commanding woman's voice called out, "I'm here, and I brought the birthday boy." Thus entered Rebecca Moskowitz, otherwise known as Judge Levine of the U.S. District Court. This, it turned out, was Victoria Moskowitz's mother. Her father was Justin Moskowitz, professor of economics at New York University. It was Justin's birthday celebration that I had been invited to. Mila nudged me into the kitchen as she went to greet her brother and sister-in-law. Victoria had already peeled a pot of potatoes and set them on the stove. When I entered the kitchen, she turned to me. "Am I going to be a problem for you?" I asked, feeling a sudden urge to protect her. "No, but maybe a bit of a shock," she admitted. "I've never brought a man home before. Mom can be a bit critical, so just be prepared." The situation was already awkward, and it only got more tense when we were called into the living room to meet her parents. The living room was spacious and cozy, decorated in the early 20th century style. It was a room designed for comfort, but the tension was palpable. As we walked in, Victoria retrieved a small box from the light jacket she had hung in the hall earlier. The box was wrapped as a birthday gift. A heady silence filled the room as we entered, until her father broke it with a smile and a joke. "Is this young man my birthday present, Victoria?" he asked, grinning. "No, Papa," Victoria replied softly. "I brought you this." She led us over to him to present the gift, never letting go of my hand. I realized she had been holding it tightly for quite a while. "Well," her father said, "I was hoping for a son-in-law, but I'm sure I'll like this." He smiled warmly at her. Opening the package, he revealed a well-worn baseball. His smile grew wider as everyone else looked on, bewildered. "It's a game ball signed by the Mets," he exclaimed, then stood up and hugged his daughter. I heard him whisper, "I'd still prefer a son-in-law." Victoria whispered something back, but I couldn't catch it. Her father chuckled, but I noticed her mother giving me a hard stare. Just then, Sonia arrived with her husband and 3 kids. The children burst into the living room, becoming the center of attention. "Oh, good, you came," Sonia said to me, giving me a brief hug. Introducing me to her husband, Jerry, a tall, thin man who looked like he could be knocked over by a strong breeze, Sonia said, "This is Victoria's new love." At least she got the gender right this time. Jerry shook my hand and said, "Don't mind Sonia. She just likes to tease her older sister." The conversation soon shifted to the children's latest adventures and the gifts they had brought their grandfather. It was a relief to no longer be the focal point, but I could still feel Victoria's mother's eyes on me. Dinner was simple but delicious, and the conversation was filled with the warmth of people who genuinely enjoyed being together. Occasionally, a question would be directed my way. If Victoria could answer it for me, she did so eagerly. For the more personal inquiries, I either answered briefly or deflected them entirely. Yes, my parents are deceased. A farm in Iowa. I have 1 sister. I dodged most questions about my sister since I wasn't sure how to respond. However, the real interrogation began over coffee and birthday cake. Judge Levin had been observing me, and as the children were absorbed in their gooey treats, she seized her moment. "Tell me, David, are you related to the Jones who is marrying Evelyn White tomorrow?" I paused, feeling the weight of the question, but answered before Victoria, seated opposite me, could interject with the sharp retort I sensed coming. "Yes and no," I replied. "I was supposed to marry Evelyn, but that ended, and before you ask, your daughter had nothing to do with the cancellation of the wedding." "Really?" Victoria's mother said, turning her focus to her daughter. "Yes, really, if it's any of your business," Victoria snapped, her hostility evident. "Truth is, I didn't want to bring David here, but he was invited and was kind enough to come." It looked as though her mother was about to continue her line of questioning, but Justin Moskowitz intervened, silencing his wife. "Rebecca, be quiet," he said firmly, cutting off her response. "It's clear to me that the young man discovered the truth about Mr. Kaufman. I've been observing David all evening, and he doesn't seem like the kind of man who would tolerate deceit." It was as though he had thrown cold water on her. The judge was suddenly at a loss for words. Glancing around the table, it was evident that while Victoria's parents were aware of the situation, the other guests were not. Victoria took the opportunity to clarify. "I've admired David from afar for some time," she began. "When I found him the other evening, lost and alone, I saw my chance to get to know him better. He had been deeply hurt by a deceitful woman, and yes, Mother, I love him. He's too good a man not to fall in love with." As she spoke, Victoria moved around the table to hug me from behind. "Well, good for my niece," Uncle Morty chimed in, effectively ending the conversation about Victoria and me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, with a general sense of satisfaction settling around the table. Later, as we rode back in a yellow cab, I turned to Victoria. "Did you mean it?" I asked. "What?" she replied, trying to dodge the question. I wasn't about to let her off the hook. "When you said you loved me, did you mean it?" The taxi seemed to grow very quiet. Slowly, she lifted her head and said, "Yes, I love you. When I first saw you months ago, I was attracted to you, but now it's more than just attraction. I love you, David Jones." 30 minutes later, I found myself under arrest. Evelyn had apparently spent all Friday night in our apartment, waiting for my return. Where could I have possibly gone? When I hadn't come back by Saturday morning, she grew desperate. The wedding was scheduled for Monday, and now she feared I might not show up. Panicking, she called the one person she thought had more to lose than she did, Rodrigo Ruiz, also known as Rodney Kaufman. Kaufman immediately alerted the police, initiating a search for me. They spent a day questioning every bartender along Court Street, and eventually learned I had left a bar called the Shady Lady with a Short Brunette. Victoria and I had taken a cab to her apartment in Cobble Hill, so the police then started questioning all the cab drivers who had worked that night. Late Sunday, they finally determined the taxi had dropped us off at the corner of Clinton and Congress. It didn't take long to identify the basement corner apartment as belonging to Victoria Moskowitz, a woman matching the description of my companion. Finding the apartment empty but undeterred, They stationed 2 patrol cars to wait for our return. It was an impatient quartet of officers who greeted us when we arrived. Despite Victoria's objections, the police quickly took me away. By midnight, I was sitting in a small, dingy room that badly needed a cleaning and a fresh coat of paint. Handcuffed to a table, I still had no idea what crime I was being accused of. The door opened, and Evelyn walked in, looking as stunning as ever. "Are you responsible for this?" I demanded. My voice was sharp, my anger and frustration evident. She seemed slightly taken aback and stood on the opposite side of the table. There were 2 chairs on her side, but she didn't sit down. "David, please understand. When you didn't come home, I was worried something had happened to you. So you had me arrested. For what?" "You're not under arrest. You're in protective custody, pending a potential mental health commitment," said a tall, exceptionally good-looking man who had quietly entered the room. He was even more impressive in person than in his pictures. He moved to stand next to Evelyn. He was over 20 years my senior, and despite his efforts, he couldn't completely hide the signs of middle age. "Rodney Kaufman, I presume," I said, infusing my words with as much venom as I could muster. "Rodrigo Ruiz," he corrected, "but feel free to call me Rod. I hope we can be friends." "It's Mr. Jones to you, and I have no desire to be friends." "That's unfortunate. I believe you're in a predicament and could use my friendship." I raised my chained hands a few inches, causing the restraints to clink against the table. "You can keep me here, but not for long," I said, attempting to sound more confident than I felt. "Hopefully long enough for you to hear Evelyn out," he replied calmly. She had been standing there in silence, but now she spoke. "David, you are acting under a misimpression. Rod and I are merely friends. Whatever relationship we had is over. If you had stayed long enough on Friday, I would have told you. We have a saying in Iowa, I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. I caught you in his hotel room," I retorted. "Be that as it may, you 2 have a date to wed later today, and it is in everyone's interest that you keep that date." "I'm sorry, but I refuse to marry that cheating woman," I stated firmly. Evelyn let out a small cry of pain, but Rod simply smiled and said, "Language, language, please. Let's keep our tempers." I could see that I had rattled Rodney a bit, even though he continued to smile. Evelyn turned away, her tears evident. "That attitude will cause a great deal of trouble. You are being a very foolish young man. Evelyn is a beautiful woman who will make an excellent wife. If you do not wed, there will be a terrible scandal. There are reporters expected at this wedding. It is a society event. Evelyn's reputation will be ruined, as will mine, for surely the reason will get out. People love to gossip, and this will make for splendid gossip. I'm told you have a promising career at a prestigious firm. Should you fail to marry Ms. White today, your career will evaporate, and I doubt you will find any employment elsewhere," he threatened. Now it was my turn to smile. I wouldn't marry her for a senior partnership, and I certainly wouldn't stay on as a junior associate in the bankruptcy department. "I told you he would be unreasonable," Evelyn interjected, her back still turned to me, still crying. Rod just sighed and said, "Okay, Mr. Jones, what will it cost me to make Evelyn Mrs. Jones?" "Trust me, you haven't got enough money." "It doesn't have to be forever. A year or 2, and then a discreet divorce." "Won't people ask why then?" I challenged him. He didn't flinch, and something told me he had more than one plan in mind. "The situation at the time of the divorce will be my problem. Name your price for." Further conversation came to an abrupt halt when a short, rotund man in his 60s, bald-headed and determined, entered the room, followed by 2 uniformed officers. "Hello, Rod, Ms. White. And you must be David Jones," he said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I'm your attorney, Cy Lebowitz. And this," he said, handing a document to Rodney, "is a copy of the writ of habeas corpus I just filed at the front desk." "Burning the midnight oil, see?" Rod inquired. "Business has been a bit slow lately. You know how it is," Cy replied with a shrug. "Ms. White has been acting in her fiancé's best interests. You're forcing us to seek an involuntary commitment," Rodney threatened with a stern glare. "Hardly feasible," Cy countered, since the writ was issued on behalf of his sister, his only living relative and next of kin. Did you wake her, Cy? Rodney pressed. Actually, no. It's much earlier on the West Coast. Commissioner Rodrigo Ruiz, also known as Rodney Kaufman, sighed in resignation. He was defeated. C managed to secure my release, and outside, Victoria was waiting for me. Her mother, a judge, had roused both C and the judge who signed the writ. That was the last time I saw Evelyn. There was never a baby. I suspect she chose an abortion over a scandal that could hurt her lover. As for Commissioner Rodrigo Ruiz's threat to derail my career, I have no doubt he tried, but fate intervened. I had a vacation planned for September 2 to 14, 2008, for a honeymoon that never occurred. On the day I returned to work, September 15, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, turning the financial world upside down. Gary Green became the firm's most significant partner, and I became his top associate. Victoria and I endured 6 months of 90-hour weeks before finding the time to marry, as she was visibly pregnant by then. She hadn't seen the need for precautions, having not been with a man for some time before our first weekend together. Our first child was a girl, as were the next 3, and we decided 4 was enough. Victoria followed in her mother's footsteps and became a judge, while I established my own firm. When people ask about the secret to my successful career and marriage, I tell them I owe it all to a judge's fortuitous day at the racetrack, a broken heart, and a girl named Sugar. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.